Hello, I'm Matt and welcome to Badger Workshop. I like listening to podcasts while I work and I've wanted a Bluetooth speaker for the workshop. So I got this build your own Bluetooth speaker in a box kit. The idea is you put it together in the cardboard box provided. But I didn't really want it in the cardboard box. I thought an oak box would be much nicer. I'll stick a link to the kit I used down below. So the first thing I did was rip some of this old oak down on the bandsaw and then I could get it planed down. I'm leaving the pieces a bit chunky and I'm going to go for quite a robust look to this. When I had all the pieces down to the same thickness, I could then set up a stop block on the crosscut sled and cut the bits for the box. I'd probably normally use the mitre saw for doing this, but I'm going to be using the table saw for the next stage, so I think while I was there, I just kept using it. The plan is to join the box together using box joints, funnily enough. So I've got this very simple sled I knocked together to cut the fingers. I know people have asked before, but I haven't done a video on making this sled. Maybe I'll make another one in the future, but there's some excellent videos out there. I mean, all of the Making It podcast have done their version. And I think I watched Jimmy's, Dave's and Bob's version before I made this. Before I glue the box together, I'm just going to put a hole in the top for the volume or the on and off knob to go. Then I can start getting some glue on it. The trouble with the kind of jig or sled I was using is it only cuts fingers the same width as the kerf of the saw blade. I think the blade I had in it is like 2.8mm, so it's cutting some pretty fine fingers, so actually getting the glue in between them is a little tricky. But once you've eventually got glue between all the fingers, it slides together pretty easily. This joint produces a lot of surface area, so it makes a very strong joint. I mean, totally overkill for a little radio or Bluetooth speaker like this. You could easily get away with just butt jointing these, because when the front gets glued on, that will add all the strength. But I find not only is this a very strong joint, I really like the look of it. So it's going to make the whole thing look a lot nicer in the end, and it just makes it a more interesting project for me. And hopefully, for you too. The other advantage of this joint is, when you get the clamps on, it does tend to pull itself square, but I did check it before I finished clamping it up. I always cut my joints so the fingers protrude by about 1mm, so after the glue had dried I could just sand them flush using the belt sander. I cut this bit of wood the same size as the box, and this is going to act as the front, so I want to find the centre line and then I can drill the holes for the speakers to go. I want to position the speakers more to the sides rather than the centre. Well, you'll see how it looks afterwards. I know there's a lot of science to making speakers and some very good channels about how to do it, but I'm just building a box and whacking a kit in. Luckily, I had a hole saw the correct size for the speakers I was installing. Going through this thickness of oak was a slow process. Cut through half the way from one side and then flipped it over so I got no blowout. With 2 holes for the speakers drilled, I can get the front glued on. The glue joint would be long grain to long grain, so this would be very strong. So if you didn't want to cut the fingers, you could have just butt jointed, as I said earlier, or even mitered the corners, and that would have looked nice. When I've got it lined up nicely, I can get lots of clamps on and then leave it to dry. With the front on, it looks really chunky, so to soften the edges a little, I go around with a round over bit in the router, and change over to a chamfering bit and doing the inside of the holes. So the box needs a back to it, but I don't want it to be the same size as the front, as in the same size as the box. I want it to fit inside. So I trim a piece down and just make sure it fits. I have a little brass latch to use, but it needs somewhere to attach to, so I just glue in a little block of wood for it to go onto. The kit came with a plastic on and off knob, but I want to make one from oak. So I use a hole saw to cut out a piece of oak, but the trouble is, then it's going to have a hole through the middle where the pilot goes. The other problem is where it attaches to was only supposed to go for a few mils of cardboard, not some solid oak. I need an extension rod, so I've got this bit of aluminium tube that I'm going to glue into the knob, and then it should go through the oak and onto the dial. Trouble is, you've still got that hole in the top of it, so I cut down this little bit of solid brass rod to go in there. This was not really planned, I was just improvising with things I had around the shop, but in the end I was really happy with how the different tones looked together. Before I get into the final assembly, I give everything a sand down, working up the grits until 220. The back of the box is going to be held on with a couple of these brass butterfly hinges. I need access to the back of the box because this kit comes with two options for powering it. Either use AA batteries, or there's a USB cable you can use to power it. That'd be probably what I use because I can't be bothered to keep changing the batteries. I'm going to apply the finish before installing the electrics, and I'm just going to give it a coat of Danish oil and then buff it off. The oil on, I'm really happy with how that knob looks. The oak and then the aluminium and then the brass. So the latch can be installed onto that little block I put in. I think these are called ball catches or ball latches. Anyway, they have a nice satisfying clicking sound when you close the door. It's always hard to get the corresponding bit of the latch to line up perfectly, so I'm going to install it onto it and then put a few dabs of super glue on. I can then close the door and push down on it and leave the super glue to dry for a bit. Whilst I'm waiting for the glue to dry, I raided my scrap leather bin and found this little bit of leather that I'm just folding over, putting a couple of holes in, and then screwing onto the back. This would just act as a little pull handle if I need to open the back door of the box. I say if, the very next job is opening the back door of the box. So now I can open the back door of the box, and attached to it, with any luck, is the other half of the catch, and now I can drill and get that screwed in place. The speakers themselves just get popped in place and attached with the 4 screws. Then I'm going to mount the battery holder to the back of the door so that it's easy to access them. I can then connect the speaker wires and the battery holder and the USB cable all up to the circuit board. You can see going through the top of the box I have the aluminium shaft, which is the knob I made. So I'm then going to hot glue in place the little circuit board just below that. I'm positioning it so the little turny switch thingy, technical term, goes inside the aluminium rod. And then determine how long I need that rod actually to be and cut it down with a hacksaw. Attach it permanently to the switch and mix up some epoxy and apply it to the inside of the aluminium. And then be slid back into the body of the speaker, and then over the switch. Last job, I just add another leather strap to the top as a carrying handle. I think I might be a bit obsessed with leather, oak and brass at the moment, but there's probably worse things to be obsessed by. So that's it all done. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe for more videos. Now what I've got to do is find something decent to listen to.
Hello and welcome. I'm Steve.
And I'm Al.
And I'm Brett.
And this is Fools with Tools.